An amazing day.
Give you a kiss.
You deserve it.
You do.
Judge Lippman is a kisser. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this historic day in New York City. My name is Stanley Richards, and I'm the Executive Vice President of the Fortune Society, an organization that seeks to help people rebuild their lives after incarceration and prevent incarceration through alternatives to incarceration. I came to this work by my many years of incarceration. My number once was 241-86-16-630. That number went from that to 88A-4306. And I wasn't known as or called by who I am. My crimes, my infractions on my community was how people and the system interacted with me. And I became what everybody had heard of me, the worst thing that I've ever done. And none of us should ever be judged by that. But today, we get an opportunity to end it in New York City, end it in the way New York City does its work, by doing it big, by doing it by the people, by doing it for the people. And so today, I welcome you to this announcement. For those of us who spent many years behind bars on Rikers Island, crossing that narrow bridge from Queens meant disappearing from society and entering a world defined by violence and inhumanity. Rikers conveys only one message to everyone who enters, no matter if you're a correction officer, an incarcerated person, or a visitor. Here's the message: you don't matter. For the first time in our lifetimes, there is real hope for change, thanks to the Speaker and the Mayor and the City Council. The City Council's vote today is a once-in-a-generation chance to close Rikers and replace it with something that is far better, far smaller, and much more humane. That is our borough-based facilities that will promote safety and facilitate successful reentry. At the same time, we are seeking key investments be made to reduce the number of people incarcerated and to serve those who are released to make our communities even safer than what we have right now. We are so proud right now. I am filled with emotion. We are so proud right now. We are so proud to stand with Mayor de Blasio, Speaker Johnson, the City Council, Judge Lippman, Deanna from Just Leadership, and our other organizers and community members who fought hard to make sure that we end the travesties that happen on Rikers Island. Yet, there is more work to be done. Closing Rikers will require police and district attorneys to alter their practices. It will take continued reforms from Albany, I hope you're listening, to enact less is more to fix New York State's broken parole system. It requires courageous investments in prevention and unnecessary incarceration to strengthen our communities and to provide the resources so families like my family, children like my grandchildren, could have a pathway to college and economic stability and not Rikers Island. So it is with extreme great pleasure that I'd like to now introduce our mayor. We wouldn't be standing here today celebrating if he hadn't stood tall on closing Rikers Island. And we know that standing tall did not come easy. He took the baton that many advocates, service providers, and politicians handed to him, and he ran with it. He knew that this was more than about tearing down buildings or building new ones. It's about rebuilding lives ruined by our criminal justice system. It's about jobs, education, training. It's about recognizing people's humanity. Right up until the minute before the votes today, the mayor has been calling, encouraging our city council members to vote yes in favor of closing Rikers Island, because he understands that none of us, no one in this room, should ever be judged by the worst moment in their lives. So today, with great pride and honor, I introduce to you our mayor of New York City, Mr. Mayor de Blasio.
Everybody, today we made history. The era of mass incarceration is over. It's over. This action today means that New York City is set on a new path. And Stanley talked about humanity. I want everyone to understand what this is about. It's about valuing our people, no longer condemning people and sending them on a pathway that only made their lives worse and worse, but believing that our people do not ever need to end up behind bars to begin with. Never. And if God forbid, and I always invoke this phrase, there but for the grace of God, though I go I. If God forbid someone makes one of those mistakes and ends up in our justice system, we want it to be a one-time occurrence, because we believe in a justice system that focuses on the positive in each person, the humanity in each person, the possibilities in each person. We believe in redemption. And today's vote is a vote for redemption. Many, many people said that this could not be done. And everyone here is the reason it was achieved. And I want to thank everyone, because Stanley said it right, a movement built. And it showed all of us what was possible and created a whole new sense of where our city could go. And what you did today, and I'm looking at everyone here, because everybody here deserves a share in this victory. What you did today is being watched all over the United States of America, all over the world, because the greatest city in the world said no to mass incarceration, yes to redemption. That's what you did today. Yes, it was a hard-fought vote, but it was not a close vote, because everyone worked so hard, and because of the council members here that showed such strength, that cared about the most important things, that cared about acting on a moment of reform. Literally, you're right, Stanley, once in a generation. Once in a generation. And I can tell you, having met many people who are elected officials, you will not meet that many elected officials willing to show the bravery and the courage and the foresight of the group gathered here. And I know Speaker Johnson had to go to another engagement, but I have to say to him, and then I want to talk about Speaker Melissa Mark Viverito as well, I can tell you how extraordinary their actions were. And Corey Johnson, he and I have been, for the last 2 years, working nonstop on this in a very close, constant partnership. Not only his leadership, not only the members of the council, particularly the 4 in whose districts the facilities will go, also the entire council staff, everyone banded together to take this huge, complex, challenging issue and find a positive way forward. And there are many, many people in public life who would never have had the strength and fortitude to do that. But Corey did, these members did, the team did. So first, just a huge thank you for everyone at the City Council. Speaker Melissa Mark Viverito, you led the way in so many ways. I remember when we first stood in the rotunda together and started us on this journey. And I remember that you believed, and I will always be honest, sometimes in the beginning I couldn't find a way. I struggled to see the path. All of us worked together to reduce crime. All of us worked together to reduce arrests, to reduce incarceration, and the doors started to open. But I want to give you tremendous credit for the strength of your leadership and your vision. History shows that some people are there to get things started and other people are there at the finish line, and everyone makes it happen together. Let's thank Melissa for all she has done. And I want to thank the members of the City Council. We spent a lot of time talking about this, all of us. And I had the pleasure of going to some of the districts and hearing the concerns, but also seeing the leadership. Because we all know, again, that some elected officials, if they hear criticisms or concerns, they don't necessarily say, wait a minute, we have to think of the greater good. But I saw Steve Levin talk to his district about the greater good. Diana Ayala talked to her district about the greater good. I saw it with Karen Koslowitz. I saw it with Margaret Chin. And it's something to behold, having been a city council member. I know what it's like to have people come up to you at the subway stop or the supermarket. And as I like to say about New Yorkers, we are 8.6 million highly opinionated people. So rarely does someone come up and not issue a strong opinion. But it's one thing to hear people's concerns, and honestly, their fears. We heard plenty of fears. They were honest fears. It's another thing to help people understand what it's going to take us to a different place. And these members did it, and I want to thank all of them. I want to thank Councilmember Mark Traeger, Councilmember Farrah Lewis, Councilmember Keith Powers, Councilmember Danny Drum, and tell me if I miss anyone, Councilmember Adonis Rodriguez. Have I missed any council members? And all the other of the 35 who voted in favor of this plan. And you're going to hear from a couple of the most profound leaders of this coalition in a moment. I want to give a special thank you to Stanley and everyone at the Fortune Society. I had the joy of being with you a few years ago. It was one of those moments in my life that made me understand. We, as a society, have been taught to misunderstand those who spend time in jail, to misunderstand what folks who happen to have been incarcerated mean to our broader society. And I was listening to you that day, and I said, you know what? We all need to rethink this because there's so much potential in all of us. Again, the goal is that through this plan, through these investments, a lot of young people will never, ever see the inside of a jail cell. Just remember that. We're going to the root of all this. Hundreds of millions of dollars to make sure that everyone, in particular young people, are supported. But even though we acknowledge that some people at some point in their life might be incarcerated, we need to remember the value of them as human beings. You're one of the people that taught me that. So Stanley, thank you for doing that for so many of us. Everyone, a quick thank you. The group of folks in my team that worked, this was a labor of love for all of them. They worked extraordinarily hard on this. And I want to thank Emma Wolf and Leiden Sleeper and Lincoln Ressler and Liz Glazer and Dana Kaplan and Tahira Moore, Jeff Lynch, many, many others who were part of this, all the folks at the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice, all the folks at Department of Correction, Commissioner Cynthia Brand, and so many others who really put their heart and soul. They believed this was a historic moment. They believed it was once in a lifetime, and they acted that way, and they achieved the goal. I know you feel that way, Tahira. And a special thank you to one of the real, true statesmen and voices of conscience in this city, and I know he's one of the people who've been behind many great causes and ahead of the time many, many times. Herb Sturz, the Open Society Foundation, thank you. As Herb will attest, they said it couldn't be done until it was done. They said it was impossible until it was possible. And all the advocates and the formerly incarcerated individuals who've been part of the Closed Rikers campaign, I'm going to call out all these organizations. Let's clap for all of them. Just Leadership, thank you. Catal Center, thank you. Beyond Rosie's, thank you. Osborne Association, thank you. Fortune Society, thank you. The Lippman Commission, thank you. The Women's Prison Association, thank you. Exodus Transitional Services, thank you. Bronx Connect, thank you. Everyone in the crisis management system, Cure Violence Movement, thank you. And the Vera Institute of Justice, thank you. Now, if there's any other elected officials who come in here, let me know. I know Assemblymember Rodney's Bichot might be joining us, who's been another. I'm sorry. Why are you not here? Why are you not here? Okay, now we're going to clap. Assemblymember Rodney's Bichot, thank you. So everyone, this is one of those moments where a cycle gets broken. There's been a cycle of incarceration. Let's be blunt about it. Never-ending cycle. A lot of good people got caught up into it. A lot of lives ruined. It did not have to be this way. It ends now. That cycle ends now. Something very different will happen now. I had some people ask me earlier, oh, do you think this is not going to happen just because there's a vote? I'm like, I don't know what planet you're on. This vote is binding. Today's vote is definitional and binding. Rikers is closing. There will be community jails, period. Period. We are the safest big city in America. We will continue to get safer. This will help us get safer. We have to be the fairest big city in America. This will help us get fairer. Safety and fairness walk hand in hand. And so today we can say that we have already achieved the lowest rate of crime since the 1950s, but there's something else we've achieved, and it hasn't gotten attention, but today's vote will finally shine a light on it. We have the lowest rate of incarceration of any big city in America, and it's going to get lower and lower. Finally, want to say, and this is tremendous credit to the City Council, the focus and so much of the discussion was on the root causes. And so we've made a generational investment here. The investment in neighborhood organizations, the investment in youth programs, the investment in cure violence initiatives, in job training, in education, in treatment, in counseling, all of the pieces of this package, hundreds of millions of dollars to get at the root causes, to change lives on the front end. I was over at Exodus earlier in the week, talking to some good people who had turned their lives around and now were helping others. And it was so obvious in those conversations, the intelligence of these young men, the commitment, the fortitude, the resiliency. Few things could have been different earlier in their lives. They never would have seen the inside of a jail cell. They never should have seen the inside of a jail cell. It was not a statement on their human quality. It was a statement on a lot of other things that we need to address. This plan goes at those root causes, and it's only a beginning. It's only a beginning. So this is a plan that is about fairness and compassion. It's about safety. It's about valuing every human life. That's what all of you achieved. And everyone here, I credit all of you. Every single person brought us to this day. A few words in Spanish, and then I'll have the honor of bringing up Judge Lippman. Hoy podemos decir oficialmente que vamos a cerrar Rikers Island. Estamos haciendo nuestra ciudad más justa y más segura. La era del encarcelamiento masivo no comenzó en la ciudad de Nueva York, pero terminará aquí. The era of mass incarceration ends here. Everybody, so many people contributed so much. But if we have a guru, if we have a priest, if we have a rabbi, I'm covering all of it, Jonathan. Judge Jonathan Lippman believed something very different could happen. And let's face it, there are a few voices in the city and the state that command absolute moral respect, and he's one of them. And when he said it, everyone started to think again. The commission did extraordinary work. That report was absolutely foundational and instrumental to today's success. And I think the thing about Judge Lippman that I have watched so closely and admired so much is it's all heart. Yes, you have a great mind, Judge. I'm not taking away from the mind, but it's heart. You saw things that others didn't see, and you brought together a coalition of people to make it happen. And your history, your life, everything you've done put you in the perfect place to do something for the ages, and you've done it. Judge Jonathan Lippman.
You did it. Okay. Thank you. It's a delight to be here, particularly with everyone sitting behind me or standing behind me. Before I give some appropriate thank yous to the people who really made this happen, let me just say that today marks a milestone in the future of the criminal justice system, not only in New York City, but in the nation. Today, we take a giant step in fulfilling the moral imperative of closing Rikers and replacing it with smaller, safer, more humane jails. In the end, this is a moral issue. This is about, the mayor speaks about the heart and the soul. That's what this is all about. This place of brutality and victimization is an affront to humanity. It's an accelerator of human misery. It's contrary to the values of this city that the mayor and all the people sitting here and standing here represent, of compassion and empathy and respect and dignity for every human being. Today, we have seized the moment. Once in a generation, I would say once in a lifetime even. This is an opportunity to dramatically change the public policy of this city. And not so easy, right, Mr. Mayor? Not so easy.
What he said.
And literally, we are changing the arc of criminal justice in New York City. And in so doing, I truly believe, and I've been around this country speaking about criminal justice, New York City will be the model for the entire country on criminal justice, incarceration reform, and ending the shame, the absolute shame of mass incarceration. One way in and one way out doesn't work anymore. Out of sight, out of mind doesn't work anymore. When the commission started, and Melissa, I think, is gone, but we had some very interesting conversations together, the three of us, she lit the match and started this process. And I salute her. She's so wonderful and so great to see her sitting through every minute of that hearing today. And all right, so we started on this, and none of us believed we'd be standing here today. Even I didn't, the eternal optimist, didn't think we'd be standing here today. We were determined to build a new blueprint for criminal justice and incarceration in the city, to be, the commission wanted to be, was determined to be independent. The best way we can help the mayor and the council is being someone who has a group that has credibility, that people that can turn to. And I don't only say the mayor and the speaker are right because they're right. I say it was, we believe it. We want to be independent and credible, and I hope and believe we've been able to do this. There's a commission that represents not only the gravitas, the who's who of New York City, but the diversity of the city and the criminal justice system, and we included the voice of the formerly incarcerated in our commission, particularly this guy over here, Stanley Richards, who I got a man for all seasons. This would nobody listened to those people before who had suffered the most, and we are grateful to each and every member of the commission for their selfless pursuit of this impossible dream. to all of it, Tyler Nims, the executive director, the entire team at Latham & Watkins, who are our pro bono counsel for this effort, was so proud that the roadmap we've laid out has been pursued with strength and wisdom by the visionary leaders of our city. And let me just start with Mayor de Blasio. To say that any mayor in this city, after everything that's going on, I mean every mayor before this one, would say that closing Rikers Island is the public policy of New York City was monumental. It was inconceivable that a mayor of the city, you know how, you do know how controversial it is talking about jails in the city of New York, politically charged every which way. This mayor had the guts and the courage and the inherent understanding that New York City could not succeed with Rikers Island as a symbol of the criminal justice system, the values that we hold dear. Impossible. And he understood that you had to lead. And as a political figure, as the government, you had to lead and you had to educate. And that's what this mayor did. Jails are not an easy subject for anybody. And we all know it. And I thank you for your leadership, Mr. Mayor. I thank you for the great ride together that we've had on this. And I remember talking about the great Herb Sturz, who's standing behind us, or sitting, I'm not sure what she's doing back there. I remember when my term as chief judge was just ending, the three of us talking about this particular issue. And, you know, we were at some party or whatever, and we had our heads together, and who could believe that just a few little time later, that this actually happened, and the mayor's been so instrumental and fantastic, and every person in this city should give him credit for getting this done. And there's another guy I want to talk about, and let me tell you, I had dealt with Melissa Mark Viverito, pretty tough, impressive character. And then Corey Johnson. This could never have happened without that leadership in the city council. You think, as I said, you think this is difficult in terms of broad policy disputes and the debates. Look at dealing with 50 different city councilmen and how to get this done. And I laud him for his wise, his smart, his compassionate stewardship of the council. And what a delight to work with him in the trenches and see really his genius at work. He really, I mean, I use that word advisedly. Every one of the council members would tell you that, to get this done. What a Herculean task. You know, he when the going got tough, you know, I saw him even today, and I said, "How are we doing, Corey?" He said, "Boy, it's been a long day," you know. But when the going got tough, he rose to the occasion, and he knows how to count votes also, which is very important. So I salute Speaker Johnson. What a fabulous, he has a unique skill set, so impressive. Such an impressive leader. And what can one say about the four council people? Talk about courage, councilman, councilwoman, council member, Koslowitz, Levin, Ayala, Chin. What a year or two this has been for them. Unbelievable. And you know what? These people represent the best in New York. The council doesn't get credit that it deserves. And these four councilmen deserve to be in that book. You remember about Kennedy, what Kennedy wrote, Profiles in Courage? Yep. They are profiles in courage, without question. Spectacular. And the first time I knew this was going to happen was when I went to brief the council, and each time I did it, I saw the support, the humanity, the understanding what this was about, and I really said, you know what? They understand what's happening to families and computers and communities because of Rikers, and they understand that black and brown people are disproportionately impacted by this horrible, miserable place. So I just want to say that you also look at how did this go in the advocacy community. And the mayor mentioned all of them. And I hate to, there's so many. They were so fab from day one. And sometimes, Mr. Mayor, right, wasn't so easy. They were a little cantankerous along the way.
I need to just jump in because the Al Smith dinner's looming.
Oh, I know that. I'm finished. I'm finishing. But they were all fabulous. So I want to thank everybody for bringing us to this day. I want to say that this stain on the soul of New York City is finally, once and for all, being removed from this city. And we ought to remember what happened at Rikers and never forget the inhumanity and never let it happen again. And it is instructive that the mayor has gone to the Al Smith dinner because this is about morality. This is about our religious leaders. And the Cardinal was fabulous.
Yes, he was.
Everyone from the Cardinal to Reverend Sharpton to Rabbi Potasnik, Reverend Bernard, were all fabulous. So thank you all. This is a wonderful, wonderful day for all of us.
In a second, I'm going to introduce Deanna Hoskins, who played such a crucial role in this. And her team played an outstanding role organizing this campaign. But Deanna, bear with me a second because they're trying to pull me out of here shortly. So what I want to do is just take a few questions on this from the media and then turn it back to you and the media. I'm sure we'll have questions for all of you. But let me just give them a chance. If there are any media questions now on this, yes.
What happens if by 2026 the crime rate isn't as low as you predict?
First of all, I'm absolutely certain, based on what we've seen, that not only is crime continuing to go down, we're doing it with fewer and fewer arrests, and the NYPD has proven this. Remember, 150,000 fewer arrests in 2018 than 2013, and crime went down. So that means fewer people going into the jail system to begin with. We have a lot more in the way of alternatives, including a lot in this package that will now become available on a constant basis. You have the changes in Albany, which are huge already, and there's more to come that I believe Albany will pass in the coming years. So I really believe that what we have here is the right amount of beds for the future under any scenario. And we are adamant that this plan is not only moving, it's moving on schedule. Yeah, okay, go ahead.
So I want to ask about the investment package you all announced today. So it's $390 million over about the next 3 fiscal years, and $71 million of that, right, is for alternatives to incarceration and alternatives to detention. The Littman Commission report back in 2017 called for $260 million a year for ATIs and ATDs. So I wonder why not reach that number in terms of the annual investment for those crucial programs?
We have been working for years now, and I really want to say this has been a 6-year continuum, because remember the host of criminal justice reforms that were achieved in my first term and often working with Speaker Melissa Mark Viverito and the council, the continued reforms in the last couple of years, the reforms in Albany, that we've been funding more and more alternatives to incarceration. We've been funding more and more initiatives to stop violence at its root, like the crisis management system and Cure Violence movement. This has all been building over years. So that report, which was a crucial document, referred to a number of ideas, but I'm putting it in a perspective of everything that was being done previously, everything that's being done in this package, and I think there'll be more in the future as well. So the reason we're all standing here is we all were on the same page ultimately. But the council has been adamant about a series of investments. They're in here, and then we're going to keep going certainly as we have resources to keep building on. And look at the Cure Violence movement as just one piece of this equation. Every year, working with the council, we have added more and more investment. We know this approach works. We're going to keep investing. Please.
How is this all going to happen? So one jail on Rikers already closed and converted to a rec center. When's the next jail going to close?
So Liz Glazer can help me. There you are, Liz. The ongoing effort, obviously, to close as we are able facilities on Rikers. But remember, it interplays with the construction effort. So to do the construction of the new borough-based jails, we're going to have to at some point close Manhattan. We're going to have to at some point close Brooklyn. We're going to keep mixing and matching, if you will, to make sure we have the right facilities at each time. But you're going to see steady movement, and certainly on Rikers, you're going to see facilities close. Well, of course, our correction commissioner, but it's worked on by a whole team at City Hall as well, and we're working closely with the council. See if there's anything else on this from the media. Yes?
I understand you're confident that the prison population is going to drop down below the number of beds needed, but is there a contingency plan in place in case it doesn't while after you're out of office many years from now?
Again, I'm confident because of a combination of very consistent facts. So first of all, 6 years crime's gone down for us and arrest has gone down. But remember, you have to go back to 1994 to see the origins with Comstat and Bill Bratton of the decline in crime. It's been really, really consistent. I believe that is the way of the future. And further, this is now being complemented by an extraordinary variety of strategies to stop violence at the root, to provide alternatives, and obviously the big structural changes in Albany, which we haven't even begun to feel the effect of, but we're talking about much speedier trials. We're talking about a whole lot of people who are not incarcerated because they couldn't afford bail. By the way, one of the things that's been underestimated here, because these facilities are all going to be closer to the courthouses, like much, much closer, you're talking about the impact that that's going to have on speeding up trials and avoiding breakdown in trials, which was legendary. Trials that had to stop because someone who was in jail couldn't be there on time or had to leave. This is going to change that whole reality. So I'm very confident. Look, there's always, if God forbid there was a situation, there's always some way to come up with an alternative, but I really don't see that. We've been studying this very carefully. And remember, we weren't ready to move until we were convinced, and Judge and I had this conversation. We have to be 100% convinced that these numbers added up for the long term, and I am 100% convinced. Go ahead.
I just wanted to go back quickly to ATI and ATD funding. Is the argument that you're making that additional funding, say the $260 million figure, just for sake of argument, that level of funding isn't necessary at this point because of the broader, suite of services, I guess?
No, it's an argument that's not about 1 year. I'm talking about what has been a 6-year series of changes, including a whole lot of funding. And one thing that we should do, which I think would be helpful to all of you, is show you the total money that's been spent in the previous years, very consistent with the ideas of the Lippman report. So you're asking a very fair question. Here we're at this crossing the Rubicon moment. Does it fit with a specific dollar figure at this exact moment? I'm suggesting something different, which is there's been 6 years of spending that's been growing, very consistent with the same values. Then a whole lot of more spending in this plan to take us further, and an open door to go farther beyond that as much as our resources will allow, because we're all convinced of the same thing. I mean, that's part of what needs to be recognized here, is the extraordinary unity that started with Melissa Mark-Viverito, continued with Corey Johnson and all the council members. We all want to get to the same place. And that's why you see this vast expenditure, and that's why you see all the previous expenditures, and we're going to keep doing what it takes. Gloria.
I want to give you a chance to address folks tonight who are unhappy with this plan, want the city spending money to build new cages, as they say. These are your constituents. They believe that the city is taking a step in the wrong direction, and I just want to give you a chance to respond to that.
I appreciate folks who say they would like us to live in a society that had no jails at all. I think every one of us would like to live in that society, and maybe someday we can get there. We're certainly, a lot better off than we were a few years ago, but I can't tell you in truth that we're there yet. And I get that I have constituents who have a different viewpoint, but I think one of the things I have found about New Yorkers is they like the blunt truth. In today's New York City, we still will need some jail capacity, but it's a hell of a lot less. Remember, a few decades ago, our correction population was over 20,000. We're now talking about going down to around 3,000 out of a city of 8.6 million. That's extraordinary. And we're going to keep trying to go farther. But I also want to say, to the way it's being characterized, I think that's a disservice. I think everyone here is talking about what's wrong with Rikers or speaking from the heart and speaking from history. And for some people who wanted to stay on Rikers, let me tell you, Rikers was a broken concept. If you wanted to stay there, you were going to spend billions and billions of dollars to create new facilities in a place where they shouldn't be. Anyone who thinks you could have stayed on Rikers and not spent a huge amount of money is deluding themselves. The only way to actually have humane jails that focused on redemption, that focused on helping people forward, that were fair to our correction officers too, and safe for everyone, was to create brand new facilities. And that meant you were going to be investing a lot of money in today's day and age. But to have them in communities where family members could visit, where the courthouses were nearby and trials could happen on a more speedy basis, this is the humane thing to do. So look, we should strive for a day where we don't need any jails. We've never known that day in human history. That doesn't mean we shouldn't strive for it. But based on everything we've all known and lived, this is an extraordinary step in the right direction. Yeah.
Do you plan for fewer guards?
Right now, it will all depend year by year, of course, on the number of facilities as we go through this transition, the number of folks in jail at any given point. But I can safely say this, we have the number of officers we need. And any officer we have now is going to be working for the city of New York for the rest of their career. 2 more.
The size of the jails was reduced pretty dramatically in negotiations leading up to today's vote just a couple days ago. I'm wondering, the size of the facilities was also one of the main sticking points for council members and opponents.
Yeah.
What did you lose by getting rid of that space, and do you feel like it was sort of a necessary evil to get a political win to take a loss on the size of the facilities you wanted?
No, I think, yeah, as folks are immediately saying, no. The original proposals were based on the numbers, and before the votes in Albany that started to change the situation profoundly. Remember, another thing that has to be recognized here is each year we've been learning what's possible. And really seeing a whole set of policies play out in a way that we believed would work, but we had to do them to know they would work, and they have. So it was the combination of the extraordinary changes we were seeing already in the amount of incarcerated folks. Remember, in 2018, about half as many people went through the doors of our correction system as 5 years earlier. In terms of just the pure number of people who had any involvement with our correction system, is literally about half of 5 years earlier. And that's before the changes we saw in Albany this spring that made such a difference. So that, and I mentioned the reduction in arrests. I mean, this has been a systematic reality. There was a day that was, to me, like some of the conversations I had with Judge Lippman. I had a conversation with Bill Bratton the first year I was here, and reflecting on all the changes, reflecting on getting away from stop and frisk. And he said, one of the simplest things, the most powerful things I heard about criminal justice, he said, arrest is not an end unto itself. Arrest is a tool. And there are many situations where arrest was used in the past where it's not the only tool or the best tool. And as the NYPD worked to reduce the number of arrests, and obviously it was something the council cared about deeply as well, so we all worked on this together. We saw that we could drive down crime with a lot fewer arrests. So when you think about 150,000 fewer arrests in 2018 than 2013, that's seismic in terms of impact on the number of people in jail. So it's really, as we saw the door opening to a much smaller number, that's what allowed us to bring down the height.
You referenced in your remarks to Melissa Mark-Viverito that you weren't sold on this immediately. You had some doubts.
Yeah.
Can you talk about how you changed your mind? Was there like a particular incident at Rikers, or something that kind of got you to the place?
No, I didn't need to be convinced that there was a problem with Rikers. I needed to be convinced that we had a way forward. And originally, so it's a very good question. I got to kind of take people back. I think it's hard to imagine it from the perspective of 2019. But at the beginning of 2014, even back then, we thought it wasn't going to be too long until there was another recession. We were very worried about the city's finances. We had all been through it before. A lot of us who people this place had been through the Great Recession, not so much earlier, had been through, some folks remembered very well the fiscal crisis. The sheer magnitude of the effort, and then the question of whether we could ever get to a population that would allow for the possibility. In the beginning, we couldn't find a mathematical way to do it. And it was a year-by-year thing. That conversation I mentioned with Bratton was absolutely crucial to me understanding the possibilities of much less reliance on arrest. And then literally, if you did a timeline, when did we decide to stop doing arrests for low-level marijuana possession? And then some of the initiatives at council focusing more on summons and of course the impact on stop and frisk, getting rid of that broken policy, and just you start to add up how each piece started to move the needle. We had to see crime go down in consistency with those policies to believe that they all fit, right? You might say, oh, this is a great, fair policy, but if it didn't reduce crime simultaneously, it was not going to achieve what you wanted to achieve. So we saw all that moving. And then the drumbeat for the bigger criminal justice reforms in Albany, which became more and more real. The efforts on alternatives to incarceration, which became more and more effective. I mean, all of these pieces were building and building and building. And then I think, the extraordinary work of the Lippman Commission, the resolve of the council, which, as I said, would not have been a given in most political dynamics we've all seen, and crucially, the election of the new state senate in Albany, which was sort of the straw that broke the camel's back in terms of, in a good way, in terms of the criminal justice reforms that had been waiting for years and years finally happening. And then all those things started to kind of, in a really good way, build on each other and cascade in a really good way, so that now we were dealing with a whole different set of numbers and realities. But Sally, I had to learn it step by step, and I had to believe, to the previous question, I had to believe that we were in a structural place, that we were going to reduce crime, reduce incarceration, stay that way, and be able to afford the solutions. And all those stars aligned. And thank God for this movement of people who stuck with it, because sometimes you can't do something at one moment in history, but if you stick with it long enough, those stars aligned, and they really did align. And with that, to Deanna Hoskins and everyone that she led, tremendous congratulations and thanks. Let me have Deanna come up and speak, and then take questions from them. Giving you some height, Deanna. You don't want height? You're strong the way you are. Congratulations.
Thank you,
Well done.
thank you. Definitely, today is a historical day in New York City. Our bed count will be lower than it's ever been in 100 years. But I want to be honest. We didn't get here because everybody was willing. We got here because directly impacted people kept putting the pressures on and demanded change. We didn't get here. Again, I appreciate everyone, the Lippman Commission and Melissa, of bringing this attention forward. But this movement stayed consistent because the people most impacted and who survived Rikers was refusing to give up. So when we say victory, the victory belongs to them because their voices were finally heard and they were no longer willing to be silent. So I want to bring up a couple of people I want to acknowledge because of the disrespect that happened in the chambers. They had to leave. But Brandon Hope from my team, Sarita, Vidal, Harvey, Darren, Marvin, who stayed consistent in this moment is the reason we're here. But I also want to make sure we understand this is just the tip of the iceberg. Now the work really starts. So while we heard the noise, this is about building communities to get to the root cause of where actually mass incarceration starts. It's the way our communities are over-policed. It's the way our schools have more police officers than school counselors. It's the lack of affordable housing in our communities. This is just the beginning. So for everyone who didn't think that we should be voting on human dignity, this was not about facilities. This was about people. People who actually need the opportunity to be thriving as well. But I want to also address the fact that I believe we all want to get to a society where there is zero need for prisons. But let's be honest, abolition is a goal and decarceration is the strategy, and today was the start of that decarceration. So when we talk about moving forward, we all want Rikers to close. We got there today. We all want investment in our communities. How we got there was the struggle. So what I want to send to everyone that was against this plan, you may have been against the plan, but we are all for investing in New Yorkers to thrive. Join us to make sure New Yorkers can be the best New York it is, and that we have an opportunity to continue to decrease the population before the ground is broken. Please, today, human dignity was voted on. Today, justice prevailed. Thank you.
So if there are any questions, comments, what a wonderful ending to an amazing day. Let's get a picture. Let's get a picture. Come on. Let's get a picture.